I have a couple of pages of notes for today. They never did come into a cohesive, coherent kind of whole. They were just blotches of what that movie brought to me over the course of the week. We went to see it on Monday, and I spent pretty much the next 36 hours in the fetal position. It was such a heart-ripping movie that it, combined with what Ruth had lifted in the service the day before, the retiring salary of the president of TD Bank, made me question the end result of everything we do. We come together and we talk about our values. We just read through them in the words of commitment that we share. We talk about the interconnectedness of life. We talk about love. We talk about justice and compassion. We talk about pouring love out wherever there is hatred or fear or the loss of hope, that we might be able to heal or transform the world, that we might make even one life a little better for our having done so. And we exist in this kind of bubble of suburban, educated, fairly elite world, just kind of blinkered by what we have and what we can expect and what is ours. Last week, I recognized in the focus moment how quickly that could all be taken away from us in one shattering moment. If we, as Captain Phillips was taken hostage, as his ship was taken hostage, the difference in the moment when we are completely our own captain and when we must succumb to the captainship of someone else. And we live pretty comfortably in this, under our own steam, our own resources, our own decisions, our own rights. We get to do pretty much whatever we want to. It's a bubble, as I said, that we live in, and mostly we can survive in it without reflection on what goes on beyond. But we do reflect on what goes on beyond. At least I try to get you to reflect on what goes on beyond. We share realities. We talk about the tragedies in the world, especially during the sharing time when we name those places where chaos has intervened in everyday life, and that bubble no longer exists for not just individuals, but for families, for communities, for whole nations, where things are not just the day-to-day, doing whatever you feel like doing. But they're under the guard of someone else's eye, and they're lived out with fear, with the need for a daily dose of courage and strength, something we don't generally rely upon. And I think that the reason that the movie so crushed me was because I think that in being aware of all these issues and working away on so many different fronts and seeing all the things that need to be done, I was completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of the issue set before me as it was by the film. Any of you saw the movie? Okay, good. Let me run it down for a few of you. Jordan Belfort was actually a stockbroker on Wall Street, actually got his license the day of the fall of the stock market in 1987, but found a job following that selling penny stocks, mostly to people who didn't need them and wouldn't make any money on them and couldn't afford to lose the money. But he worked sort of with this group of people, and because of his skills as a salesman, he did very, very well. Then one day, his wife, his first wife, who seems to be the only moral person in the movie, actually said to him, "But don't you think you should get the money from the people who could afford to lose a little money instead of the poor people?" And he gets this fabulous idea that if he actually could take his sales skills and actually steal money from the rich instead of from the poor, he would feel a whole lot better about it, not because he would no longer be stealing from the poor, but because he could steal a whole lot more money. So he becomes this stockbroker to the rich and famous and makes a ton of money, as he said, $49 million in the year he was 26. He doesn't really care about legal scruples, and though I don't know that he actually goes out of his way to break laws, almost everything he does breaks laws. And the group that he gathers around him is a group that is solidly loyal to him. He starts with these know-nothing nobodies in this little strip mall who are selling penny stocks and teaches them his own script, which turns them into successful brokers. They rise with him and become the significant backbone of the firm that he builds, Oakmont? Yeah, Oakmont, I think it's called. And they become the people who share their loyalty with him, support him, and benefit from the work that he does. It's incredible, quite frankly, watching the devotion that the group has to one another and the extent to which they will go to protect one another. At one point, Brad, one of the original team, who is not actually part of Oakmont, of the stock group, but an outsider so that stocks can illegally be hidden in his name. He's in the process of trying to launder some money and getting it to Switzerland to a bank so that it won't be able to be traced by the IRS or the criminal lawyers or criminal police officers who are investigating his office. Brad has an argument with Donnie, who he can't stand, and what ends up going down is that in front of a car full of police officers, they drop a briefcase with millions of dollars falling out of it. The police, of course, swoop in, arrest Brad, who is caught with his hands full, and Brad, despite the fact he hates Donnie, does 3 years in prison rather than rat on him. That's a loyalty that is incredible, particularly with these kinds of high stakes. So when you watch an entire group of, an entire office packed with people, all chanting how much they love Jordan Belfort, you know that they mean what they're saying. They actually love this man, mostly because he's made them all really, really rich, but also because he has gone out of his way to make them feel like they're loved, to overextend credit to them as a show of his respect for them, his confidence in them, his approval, his attention, his acceptance, all of those things that make people shine, that put them in a moment where they feel good about themselves. I'm reading a book now. It's not the one about perfection, but I might pick that one up too. It's called How to Be an Adult in Relationships. I knew you'd find that amusing. But it's a book that talks about when we are at our strongest. It's when we have grown up with or found pieced together in our adult relationships those things that give us attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allow us to be ourselves. In that room, with Jordan Belfort screaming at the top of his lungs into a microphone, getting them to do ridiculous things over and over again, and calling them to the work of screwing the public out of their money because everybody else's money is better in their own pockets, you see Belfort using these different things. He gives them his undivided attention. He accepts them fully as they are, no matter how they come, as long as they're in the game and they're going to do what it is that he wants them to do. He accepts them. He approves of them and their tactics, which would be probably not approved of anywhere else, but he knows that they have value and worth depending on where he's going. So he approves of them. He shows them his personal affection. Every Friday, I think it is, they have a debauchery party where they look every week for something a little worse to do at that party. And throwing the little people is part of that, you know. So what could they do that would stretch the limits of profanity or disgust? So he has affection for them, odd though it is. And he allows them each to be themselves in their greediest, most money-driven hearts, which is, of course, what he thinks is at the heart of everything, not just the people who are working for him, but the people that they are screwing out of money. Because if they didn't want more money, he wouldn't be able to screw them out of it. It's their hope for what they might be able to get out of the stock market that drives them to be gullible to his plans. So Jordan Belfort completely figured that all out. He knew exactly, even without the how to be an adult in relationships, he knew exactly how to play his people and how to give them the opportunity to show the kind of loyalty that he needed. Now, Martin Scorsese made the book based on a book that Jordan Belfort wrote himself. At the end, spoiler alert, he does time. And he does time a very little bit of time because he rats out all his friends. After being the recipient of incredible loyalty through this incredible ride to the top, he turns on all of his friends and sells them all out in order to protect himself and get a better deal. So he ends up doing 3 years in prison. And he writes this phenomenal book, and the reading that Elaine shared with you is his, kind of reflection on, I hope you learn something from my life. If I can't be a good example, let me be a great warning. Who said that? I can't remember. Anyway, some woman said, let me be a big warning. Anyway, so he was a warning, and he's saying, don't do this. Don't do this. Even though he's now currently a motivational speaker, and as you see at the end of the film, he's teaching other people who want to be like him, rich, how to do that. And so he's continuing to ply his trade, even though he says, don't do it the way I did it. I think he's talking about drugs there, but I'm not sure. He's definitely not talking about greed, because he is still plying greed and the trade of greed in order to promote himself. But Martin Scorsese picked the book up and made a movie out of it. And my only hope is that Belfort exaggerated in the book, and that all those things didn't really happen. There's one scene in the book where he has taken Quaaludes, and they're really old, and they didn't seem to really kick in. And he has to get out of the house to talk to someone because he's found out that his phone is tapped. And so someone is warning him and says, go someplace and phone me from a payphone. So he goes to the payphone, and he's on the telephone when the ludes kick in. And he can't function. He can't function at all. He drags himself to his car, a Lamborghini, I think. Not really up on my cars, but he rolls himself down the stairs as a method of transportation, not an accident. He knows that that's how he can get from A to B, is to roll himself down the stairs. He manages to get in his car. He gets home, not a scratch on the car. He's absolutely fine. He's kind of surprised at himself. He goes in, and all hell is breaking loose in the house, and he deals with that. I'll leave that to you to watch. And then the cops show up. And he's kind of like, what's with you guys? And they take him outside, and his car is actually destroyed. He had the impression that he had managed to make it all through unscathed. But the car was a disaster. So my hope is that the book is his first telling of the tale. That there really was pain, and there really was misery, and there really was challenge, and he really did experience some stress at some point in time, and not just when the IRS was breathing down his neck. There's a book that many of you have probably read when you were young. It's about a painting, a novel, about a painting that has a painter called Basil Hallmark, Hallward, who paints this full-size painting of this young, gorgeous young man in the prime of youth. And in the last sitting, the subject of the painting meets one of Basil's friends, Lord Henry, who tells him, this is your moment, because right now, everything is going for you. You're beautiful, you're young, you're strong. You can have everybody eating out of your hand. But it's going to wane, because everything is built on how beautiful you are. And that's going to disappear. It happens. The subject of the painting is disheartened, tragic, this understanding of age and the loss of what is his greatest gift, the loss of his beauty, his looks, his youth, his passion. He's shocked by that, and he utters this wish, if only I could always look like the beauty of this painting that you've made of me, rather than have the painting always be there as a reminder of how beautiful I once was. And everything else I'm just going to look horrible. Things are going to happen to me. Life is going to happen, and I will never, ever be able to emulate that again. And as the story goes, the twist is that that's exactly what happens. It's the painting of Dorian Gray. And every time he does something that's not very nice, the painting picks up a little bit of that not very niceness, beginning with kind of a smirk in the lips, and ending with this painting of dreadful horror that this man has kept hidden behind a curtain, so that he, as he aged, he's about 38, 40, he hasn't shown any sign of anything that's happened to him. And free from the thought that what he does and the debauchery in his life might reflect itself on his being, he acts abysmally, leading even to murder. The story of that story, the purpose of that story, was a cautionary tale that we should take care of our souls, not just what we look like. And yet our society is so focused on what we look like. Not our physical appearance maybe, but what we drive and how we dress and what our homes look like and where we live, and that we show some kind of wealth, some kind of at least comfort, that we aren't the scumbags that Jordan Belfort talks about that work at McDonald's and drive around with ugly hags next to us in our cars, but that we exude this confidence of wealth. And Oscar Wilde was trying to say there's an underbelly to all of that is really ugly. And we need to find ways to expose it before it, as happens when Dorian Gray finally slices the painting to destroy it, it actually kills him. So curled up in the hours after watching that movie and thinking about the task of trying to right our world so that that image of wealth and of security and of confidence isn't what leads us to sell our souls and to destroy our planet and destroy those things that we say we value. I thought that maybe one of the biggest things that came out of that movie would be that we learn, those of us, and you're all on this line of witnesses with me, those of us who seek to be voices that stand opposed to that kind of thing in the world, that speak out against injustice, that raise the question of the absence of investigation into the deaths of so many Aboriginal women, that lift before us the concept of the inequities in wealth, that walk to Parliament in order to say this is wrong, this way in which we are treating the Aboriginal people of our land, or that write letters to corporations or walk the shores of the Great Lakes to be witness to their abuse. That those of us who even in a tiny way identify ourselves as activists, that we find a way to take care of our souls. Because even though intellectually we can say we're on the side of the right, our souls betray us if we don't care for ourselves. If we would bludgeon ourselves or overwork ourselves or not give ourselves rest or make ourselves go to every single action at the detriment of our own personal health, then we are not mirroring what it is we want to see happen in the world. I think my reaction to the movie spoke volumes about the need for us to care for ourselves as we go about this work. I think the Lamborghini, pristine as Belfort thought it was and destroyed as it really was, mirrors that picture of Dorian Gray. He thought everything he was doing made him beautiful and strong. He thought it was what we all wanted. But the destruction and the ugliness that lay behind all of it came crashing down, brought it crashing down at one point. At the end of the film, the police detective that had been investigating him and had finally managed to catch him and then get him to rat on all his friends and put them all behind bars. Belfort had scoffed at him for riding the subway, and as you know, the scum of the earth always do, don't you know? And at the end of the film, the detective is on the subway looking around at the people he was sharing the car with. And it's impossible to know whether or not he's thinking, wow, I'm so glad I have my freedom, that I can come and go and get on the subway and get off and, I'm free. Or whether he's thinking, wow, these really are the scumbags of the earth. Maybe I should try the other side. Scorsese never answers those questions. He just lays them out for us and asks us to answer them ourselves. And I think that one of the most pressing questions that Belfort's story puts to the fore is, what do we do with our greed? We all have it. There's no point in denying it. We all want. But what do we do with that? And how do we care for our own souls enough that whatever that greed is, we can manage it, we can take care of it, we can act in holistic and humanistic ways, and we can still have dignity, and we can still look those people we travel with on the subway and everyone with whom we share our lives, we can look them in the eye with integrity, with love, with trust, and with respect. Jordan Belfort is probably still spinning a tale somewhere and screwing someone out of their money with some kind of a story. But the stories we tell will weave a better future. And if we can care for ourselves long enough that they're told enough, reiterated, shared from one person to a next, one community to a next, then maybe that huge thing that Belfort's movie depicted will not become the norm. And if it is, we can begin the work of dismantling it brick by brick, so that love and beauty and justice and compassion will prevail. This is my only hope. Thank you.